Death is no way to make a living. However, it is a great concept for a horror comedy that still holds up to this very day. I'm John Retton with the retro review of The Frighteners, written and directed by Peter Jackson, also written by Fran Walsh. But yes, Peter Jackson, the man that started out doing horror comedies before getting the opportunity to make the super popular and super long Lord of the Rings trilogy. Yeah, he was doing movies like this in the mid-90s, and while he did a movie like Dead Alive that came out a year before this, and I hated that, absolutely fucking hated it, thought it was just a goddamn abomination, haven't seen it in years, but fucking hated it. I love this, because The Frighteners mixes horror and comedy and a little bit of drama and a little bit of plucking at the heartstrings, which actually kind of fits given what the killer ends up doing to dispatch his particular victims. It stars Michael J. Fox as Frank Bannister. I just want to say right now about Michael J. Fox, the fact that he has a condition, he has Parkinson's, I believe, and he has been able to carve out a hell of a goddamn career with the Back to the Future trilogy, TV shows, movies like this. Fucking inspiration. Great on him for continuing to push forward and do some great stuff. And he, as Frank Bannister, he lost his wife in a car wreck, and after that, he's been able to talk to ghosts, see ghosts, and just, have a connection with the paranormal. He's also conflicted over the fact of being here or wanting to be with his wife, because he really loved his wife, even though they had a bit of a terrible end, as far as you never know what you got till it's gone, basically. I'll get into a little bit more about this movie as it goes on, and yes, there are going to be spoilers. It is a retro review. It's been out for 26 years. You can pause it right now and watch it if you haven't seen it. It's on the cock. See, didn't I tell you that movie was goddamn great? So, he has ghosts under his employ. Cyrus, not Cyrus the Virus, not Don Cyrus Callis, not Cyrus, the network executive, not the guy with the NDAs, not him, non-wrestling fans have no fucking idea who I'm talking about. Played by Chi McBride. Chi McBride's had a hell of a goddamn career, too. And also Stewart, who's kind of the nerdy one, played by Jim Fife. Not the town of Fife. That's about 65 miles from me. If you are not from Washington, you have no fucking idea what I'm talking about. They are ghosts under his employ. There's also a judge, played by John Astin, who's an old Western guy that likes to shoot at ghosts, and also his dog that's also dead. And also there's some weird physics and weird stuff as far as how ghosts can live and die again, considering they're ghosts. It's really odd. But he uses this newfound stuff to scam people and use these ghosts to, give people the, use the frighteners against people, as Arlie Ermey's character says, aka the drill instructor guy from Full Metal Jacket that had a hell of a goddamn career. I always want to say Emery, but maybe that's just because I'm obsessed with Emery boards, or maybe I'm not. Maybe I am. You're not in my head. If you are in my head, you don't want to be there. I don't want to be in my own goddamn head. But nevertheless, the town of Fairwater is besieged by a sudden series of unexpected deaths. People have strange, heart attacks, except their hearts are crushed. The arteries are clean as a whistle, but it's like pressure is just crushing the heart. What is causing this? Well, we also find out that there was a 1964 tragedy in a hospital where an orderly, played by Jake Busey, aka the Human Death Mask, that was fathered by the original Human Death Mask, Gary Busey. And I'm sorry, they just look like, I'm sure they're both lovely individuals, but they just look like human death masks, and I can't unsee it. Johnny Bartlett, who went on a murderous rampage. He also has Patricia, the younger Patricia, I don't remember who she was played by, but the adult Patricia, played by Dee Wallace. She was an unwilling participant, or maybe she was a willing participant. Gonna give you a bit of a spoiler, she was. Big shock. And her mother was the main head of the hospital. Main head. I'm mature, aren't I? And a number of years later, suddenly there's this weird Grim Reaper that's causing all this. What's causing all this? Woo! And there were numbers also carved into the foreheads of all the victims. It was 12, and then Bartlett was executed. But of course, since there's a Grim Reaper crushing people's hearts and doing stuff, naturally, Johnny Bartlett's back. I mean, I don't really think that's any big shock. In fact, with a movie like this, nothing is particularly shocking. What's great about this is the comedy mostly worked, and as a horror movie, it works enough because it's got a breezy pace and also fun, jaunty, goofy, Danny Elfman. Music sounds like Danny Elfman. Wait, it's done by Danny Elfman. If you are a longtime MST3K fan, that is a deep cut, and you're dying laughing in the comments. But what happens with this is Bannister has to figure out all this shit that's going on, and also how Trini Alvarado's Lucy gets involved. God, Trini's so fucking gorgeous in this, and still gorgeous now. I mean, good lord. Good fucking lord. I still would, and you still would too. She loses her husband, Ray, played by Peter Dobson. Peter Dobson. Anyway. He's a health nut, but he dies suddenly because he gets his heart crushed because he's a victim. And now, more victims and more people are falling, and there's a series of events, unfortunate events as it were, that leads the police to think that Bannister may be the cause of this. Even though this one cop says there's no fucking way. There's no fucking way it can be him. If you look at the cop, the main cop, you will know exactly who I'm talking about. He's been in a ton of shit. A lot of these actors have been in a ton of shit. Some were on the way up. Some could stop them because they weren't going all the way up. I don't think that's even how the lyrics work. But nevertheless, they're all trying to figure out and solve this mystery before Fairwater is history. DuckTales, woohoo. And the special effects, I can't say all of them hold up. There are some that are a little bit goofy, but some of them actually work because for the mid-90s, these were cool. And also, you get to see a weird Grim Reaper with a ghostly scythe and everything. And you can see Michael J. Fox do some really good shit and be funny. Michael J. Fox has really good comedic timing. He's a pretty good dramatic actor, in all honesty. This movie was underappreciated, and I actually fucking hate that it's not talked about more, and I wish that it was. But what ends up happening in this movie, essentially, is actually there's some funny stuff where Bannister ends up meeting Lucy, who's not in the sky with diamonds, and Ray, played by Peter Dobson, who, this is after Frank had accidentally ran over his fence and his garden gnomes, and he says, well, here's what the price is going to be to fix this house, or we could just forget about the fence and call it even. I also want to say that I normally hate movies where the town looks like a set, but it works here. Peter Jackson actually channels Tim Burton about as best as he can. And what's great about this is after Frank kind of gets caught in the middle of this, freaking plot and gets caught trying to scam somebody that actually knew that he was complete bullshit, he then goes after this journalist, basically says, well, you shouldn't do this or whatever. I actually know what the hell I'm talking about, but he's conflicted about his wife and everything, and also the numbers being carved into the forehead. And also there's Patricia in the house with her mother. And her mother says Patricia never leaves the house. She says that she was an unwilling participant, but I know she's evil. Quick question. Why didn't you have her locked away? Oh, right. They couldn't prove that she actually did something. So they're just going to keep her locked in the tower. And whenever she gets caught. But then she breaks loose and then vamoose. And now you know the plot. It's Bartlett Maniacs. So... the thing about this movie, though, is the breezy pace to it. Hour and 50 minutes. They set stuff up nicely. And the ghost physics are a little bit weird. There's this one point where the journalist woman is going to get targeted. And they're at a museum where somebody dies. Yet everybody goes back to drinking and partying. Because more people are getting killed. John Astin's character, Judge, is getting tired. He's like, I'm old. Apparently ghosts can age. I guess? Well, Judge shows up and shoots at the Grim Reaper and then fucks a mummy in a sarcophagus. No, really, he does. I'm not fucking kidding. He even says the line, I like it when they lie still like that. You want to talk about things that haven't aged well? God. Apparently it was Judge Bill Cosby. So... there was this one funny moment between Trini Alvario and Peter Dobson where they were talking. He was dead, she was alive, and Michael J. Fox is there as well, and they're having a communication thing. But Ray doesn't want to accept that he's dead, and there's also some funny stuff. And it turns out that Lucy, of course, has a bit of affection for Frank. Lucky Frank. God, I wish she had affection for me. Moving on from that. Since there were 12 victims, all these other numbers are popping up. Obviously, obviously Bartlett wants to continue growing his number. Why? because he wants to be known as the greatest serial killer of all time with the highest body count. Judge ends up getting killed during this whole after killing that fucking that mummy. Yeah, he kind of deserved that for making her lie still like that. And then he dies, so he's a ghost that dies. What happened to the dog? Did the dog just vanish? Arlie Ermey's character grills Frank at one point, saying, "My tour runs another 85 years, and I got, a grave with your name on it." At one point, when Jeffrey Combs' character, his weird character, who doesn't like being yelled at by women, but knows all this weird stuff, has done deep undercover operations with cults and sections and weird groups. The camera's about this fucking close to him. I don't know why it's this fucking close. And also the Crispin Glover hair was throwing me off. He was being all weird, like, oh, you could... It's like talking about this one woman that was able to kill an animal with her mind just because she wanted to. What? It's so weird. So, the woman basically says, well... Patricia's evil. You really should stay away from this house. So naturally, nobody stays away from the house. And Ray ends up getting killed because he sees that the house is evil. And he gets his face ripped off. And then his body thrown onto the car hood after Lucy escapes while out of the sky with diamonds. Thankfully, nobody is named Sam, so we don't have to worry about making the pants too long here. And as others end up dying, Frank ends up locking himself in prison. He basically just says, I'm turning myself in. I don't want to deal with this anymore. Because other people die. The journalist lady dies. She grills him before getting cast off into the afterlife. And then Lucy has to talk to him and basically say, you have to help me. You have to help me with this. We have to take care of this. Well, then... he ends up having an out-of-body experience after seeing Stewart killed and also Chia McBride's Cyrus being killed. And he has an out-of-body experience to become a ghost. He has to be revived soon. But Milton says, hey, I want to be weird and creepy and also get really, really, really close to you. Hi. Can you back up, please? What he basically ends up doing is arresting / because he's a government agent. He ends up arresting / kidnapping Trini Alvario. Oh, I see. It's okay when it's done in movies, but when I do it, but I can't talk about that till the cases are settled. She ends up escaping from that after Frank's ghost, his brief ghost appearance. He ends up helping her. He almost gets to Bartlett, but then he gets revived. He's just about to kill him with his own scythe, and then he gets revived because Lucy's a doctor. And then she goes to the house because he says, you gotta get Patricia out of the house. But then it turns out Patricia's actually evil. What? And what happens is another series of unfortunate events where the mother's killed. Why it took her this long to kill the mother, I don't know. And they end up having to go to the old hospital with Bartlett's ashes. And it's to the old hospital that has a chapel in it. Why they have to go to that particular chapel, I'm not exactly sure. Milton gets the ashes and says, oh, I'm sorry, let me dump those out. And then Bartlett's back. Totally back. Despite the fact he was back before. It's complicated and weird. And also Patricia would chase him around the house and is chasing him around the hospital with a shotgun. That somehow doesn't run out of bullets, and somehow the hospital was right next to the goddamn house. Bit weird, that. Maybe it was in an underground tunnel. I don't know. So, Frank ends up getting killed because, you can only take so much of a beating. There was this one funny moment just before that where Milton says, oh, I'm an asshole. Yes, I'm an asshole with an Uzi. And then he tells him to turn around, and Patricia ends up shooting Milton, and his ghostly face appears right there. Is really fucking hilarious. And then it looks like he's dead, so it looks like Lucy's about to get killed. And then suddenly Patricia gets her spirit pulled out by Frank Bannister because Frank's like, okay, I'm going to play dirty. Hey, Bartlett, come get your girl. Whee! They go up in the wormhole into heaven. And then Bartlett gets Patricia and says, haha, we're going back down to Earth. And then they get dragged down by a hell worm that just happens to be right there. Yeah, I don't know either. Peter Jackson's a bit odd. And Frank's up in heaven. He's talking to Cyrus and Stuart, and then sees his wife, and she says it's time to go home. Well, I am home. Nah, the authorities decide it's just not your time. Start living. And she tells him to be happy, pushes him down. Lucy's all upset because even though she's safe, she lost Frank, who she's grown attached to, and then he wakes up, and they end up living a happy life together. And it's just a really, really fun movie. Isn't it great? Isn't that so happy? All death and scythe and weird, CGI sheet, Grim Reaper wandering around like this. Should have gotten a goddamn blanket for this. I wouldn't have looked ridiculous at all. It was a fun movie. A really fun movie. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Retlin. I'll see you soon.